Hello, I'm Dilek Tuna and you're watching A News. Let's take a look at today's top stories. Trump warns Iran that time is running out for the nuclear deal as military builds up in the Gulf. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer meets China's President Xi Jinping in Beijing. And the UN Security Council urges collective commitment to the second phase of the Gaza ceasefire plan. US President Donald Trump has warned Iran to make a deal on nuclear weapons or the next attack would be far worse than last June's. Tehran has responded with a threat to strike the United States, Israel and those who support them. These warnings come amid a buildup of American forces in the Middle East.
To begin reinstating U.S. nuclear sanctions.
U.S. President Donald Trump has warned Iran that time is running out to reach a new nuclear deal as the United States continues to build up its military presence in the Gulf. In a social media post, Trump urged Tehran to return to negotiations and rule out nuclear weapons, adding that a massive armada is heading to Iran. He warned that failure to reach an agreement could lead to a far more severe U.S. attack than last year's Operation Midnight Hammer on Iranian nuclear sites. Iran responded quickly with Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi saying it had not requested talks with the U.S. and communicates only through mediators such as U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. Tehran says it is open to respectful dialogue but will defend itself if provoked, insisting its nuclear program is peaceful.
There has been no contact between me and Mr. Witkoff in recent days, nor has any request for negotiations been made by us. Various intermediaries have, of course, been in touch. Different countries are trying, in good faith, to play a role, and we are in contact with them, but no decision has yet been taken, and there has been no request from our side. Our position is clear. Negotiations cannot take place under threats, and any talks must be conducted in conditions where threats and excessive demands are set aside.
On Tuesday, Trump said another U.S. armada was heading towards Iran and expressed hope that Tehran would reach a deal with Washington.
Right at the end, they were about a month away from having a nuclear weapon. We had to do it. And by the way, there's another beautiful armada floating beautifully toward Iran right now. So we'll see. I hope they make a deal. I hope they make a deal.
And what, they'll land down here or over here?
White House officials say the move to boost its military presence in the Middle East, in Jordan, Qatar and the Indian Ocean is a defensive one, but also to put pressure on Tehran. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian told Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince that Tehran supports any legal process to prevent war, with both sides suggest dialogue is still possible. The treats come after nationwide protests over the collapse of the currency evolved into a wider challenge to the leadership. Human rights groups say thousands have been killed, though Iranian authorities dispute the figures. Tensions remain high, with both Washington and Tehran warning of serious consequences if diplomacy fails.
Again, Tehran has warned it will respond strongly to the recent military threat by US President Donald Trump while keeping the door open for diplomacy. The country's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said Iran favours a fair and equitable agreement. Our correspondent Turaj Shiraliliu has more from Tehran.
Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has warned the US President Donald Trump of a strong response if Washington strikes Iran, while signaling Tehran's openness to a fair and equitable deal. In reaction to Trump's renewed threat of military action on Wednesday, he said that Iran's armed forces are prepared with their fingers on the trigger. His statement was made in a post on X in which Iran's top diplomat also said that Tehran's valuable lessons learned from the US-Israel 12-day war last June have enabled it to respond more strongly, rapidly, and profoundly. He added that Iran has always welcomed a mutually beneficial, fair, and equitable nuclear deal on equal footing, free from coercion, threats, and intimidation, which ensures Iran's rights to peaceful nuclear technology and guarantees no nuclear weapons. Araghchi reiterated that nuclear weapons have no place in Iran's security calculations and that Iran has never sought to acquire them. On Wednesday, the Iranian foreign minister also said that Tehran has not requested for negotiations with Washington, stressing that talks cannot work under threats. Speaking to reporters on the sidelines of a cabinet meeting about the U.S. military buildup in the region, alongside calls for talks, he said that diplomacy conducted under the pressure of military threats is ineffective. Turaj Shiralilu, Tehran, Foreign News.
Amid rising political strain in Iran, extended online outages are placing further stress on everyday life, disrupting jobs, limiting access to news, and leaving many feeling increasingly isolated. This report hears from Iranians on how the restrictions are reshaping work and communication.
For many across Iran, the outage has become another daily struggle layered on top of months of uncertainty. Iranian citizens and businesses continue to suffer from a nationwide internet blackout, imposed as authorities deployed heavy force to suppress widespread anti-government protests. The shutdown, in place since January 8th, has disrupted commerce in an already fragile economy.
I think it's been 17 days since we've had no internet. We have no information from outside. We don't know anything about what happened in our city, in our country. We've been cut off from all the people we knew, and even from people who live outside of Iran.
Online employees say the blackout has hit their earnings hard and left families unable to communicate.
I have a series of classes. I teach. In fact, my online classes were cancelled, and naturally I lost money, and I'm still losing money.
The effect was that my classes were cancelled, my income stopped, and I also have another job. I am a book translator. I was translating books, and when translators work, they have to use sources like ChatGPT and Google Translate and all kinds of dictionaries, which were not accessible, and everything was closed.
Iranians also say the prolonged internet shutdown has left young Iranians feeling cut off from the modern world and deprived of basic access to information.
This period has been very difficult because, for example, a young person like me was thinking that it is now 2026 in the world. Everything is progressing. Conferences, special seminars are being held. The internet and applications are being developed. And we are living in a place where our natural right to have the internet and free access to news has been blocked. This right has been taken from us.
While limited access exists to domestic websites and school networks, broader connection to the global internet remains blocked, leaving Iranian businesses struggling to operate normally.
A passenger plane has crashed in northeastern Colombia, killing all 15 passengers on board, including a local lawmaker and a candidate to Congress. The twin-engined Satina plane lost contact shortly after taking off from Cucuta to Ocaña. The wreckage was later found in a remote mountainous area. Authorities have yet to determine the cause of the crash and have launched a full investigation. Peru is grappling with huge unrest in Lima over interim President Jose Gerry's alleged misconduct. Protesters from the Generation Z movement clashed with police on Wednesday, demanding Gerry's resignation amid the political scandal. The scandal, dubbed Chiffergate by local media, centres on Gerry's undisclosed meetings with Chinese businessmen. He denies any wrongdoing, and the earlier rape allegation was dismissed for lack of evidence. In Congress, 6 censure motions and 1 motion to remove Gerry have been filed.
No ha habido contenido ilícito en la reunión.
European Union foreign ministers are meeting in Brussels for a session of the Foreign Affairs Council. Discussions are set to focus on Russia's war against Ukraine, including peace efforts and the EU's support for Kyiv. Ministers will also address the situation in the Middle East and the African Great Lakes region. Swedish Foreign Minister Maria Malmer Stenergard, before the meeting, called for increased pressure on Russia and proposed new sanctions.
Good morning, everyone. Once again, I stand here and I'm quite frustrated, but also determined. I'm frustrated because during the last couple of weeks, due to unacceptable rhetoric by the US, we have been focusing on the wrong things. We need to put more pressure on Russia. That is the only way to stop the killing. And this is why Sweden and Finland have proposed 3 things for the new sanctions package. First of all, we need to impose a full services maritime ban on all Russian vessels that transport energy. Secondly, we need to ban the imports of fertilizers, and that is the 3rd biggest import group coming from Russia. And thirdly, for moral reasons, we need to stop the export of European luxury products to Russia.
Storm Kristin has killed at least 5 people in central and northern Portugal and left more than 800,000 residents without electricity. The storm uprooted damaged homes and disrupted roads and railways. Civil protection authorities reported winds reaching 150 kilometres an hour, along with heavy rain and snow, causing more than 3,000 weather-related incidents. The storm then moved into Spain. In Torremolinos, strong winds toppled a palm tree, killing a woman. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has met with China's President Xi Jinping. Starmer highlighted the UK is seeking a more sophisticated relationship with China and highlighted it's a landmark visit to China, the first by a UK leader since 2018. His 3-day trip is aimed at boosting economic and strategic ties after years of distrust and acrimony.
UK hopes to strengthen economic and strategic ties with China and hopes to open new opportunities for British businesses after strained relations. Prime Minister Keir Starmer is meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping on Thursday, as well as with Premier Li Qiang and Chairman of the National People's Congress Standing Committee, Zhao Leiji.
We've agreed that on tariffs for whisky, we're looking at how they're to be reduced, what the time frame is, visa-free travel, how far, how much, and when that can start, and on the information exchange on small boats, the cooperation that we need, within a dialogue actually about greater strategic focus on security and defence. But for us it's very important on small boats that we get our arms around the engines that are being used in those small boats. So on all those 3 areas, but they're examples of a much wider opening of access for business that we discussed at great length in terms of the fact that after 8 years, this is the first visit by a Prime Minister, and we wanted to make sure that we've got that strategic approach on all of these issues.
Starmer is accompanied by leaders from more than 50 major British companies. Representatives from key sectors include finance, pharmaceuticals, manufacturing, culture, and the creative industries. Experts say there should be a number of deals made between both countries.
For this visit, one of the things we're going to have to get on board with is the idea that China is indeed a technology superpower now. And we have to work out how we're going to engage with that. There are things that China's doing in cancer research, in pharma, in other areas, which are very, very important. And we have to work out how do we engage with China, how do we research with China. It's our 2nd largest research partner after the United States. We just have to have more clarity about whether we can go ahead with these, or if we say no, whether we're willing to bear the costs in that.
This 4-day visit marks the first by a British Prime Minister to Beijing since 2018. It comes against the backdrop of increasingly tense relations with the United States and is seen as a potential turning point in UK-China relations. These have been strained for years over issues such as the curtailing of political freedoms in Hong Kong, China-Russia cooperation, and allegations by British security services.
The United Nations is urging all parties to commit to the second phase of the Gaza ceasefire. The plan focuses on reducing tensions, strengthening security and creating conditions for further Israeli troop withdrawals. Officials say disarmament of militant groups will be linked to phased withdrawals with oversight from the US, Egypt and Qatar.
Demilitarization of Gaza will include an internationally funded weapons buyback program. That is according to what the United States has told the UN Security Council. Speaking on Wednesday, US Ambassador Mike Waltz said weapons held by militant groups would be decommissioned through an agreed process. The plan is part of a broader ceasefire arrangement reached in October. Palestinian militant group Hamas retains control of just under half of Gaza following an October ceasefire deal brokered by US President Donald Trump. The agreement ties further Israeli troop withdrawals to Hamas giving up its weapons. Washington says it will pressure Hamas to disarm, working with 26 countries that have joined President Donald Trump's Board of Peace. The board also operates in consultation with the Palestinian National Committee.
Hamas must not have any role in the governance of Gaza directly or indirectly in any form, period. All military, terror, and offensive infrastructure, including tunnels and weapon production facilities, will be destroyed and not rebuilt. International, independent monitors will supervise a process of demilitarization of Gaza to include placing weapons permanently beyond use through an agreed process of decommissioning and supported by an internationally funded buyback and reintegration program.
Sources say Hamas has agreed to discuss disarmament with other Palestinian factions and mediators. However, two Hamas officials told Reuters they have not received any detailed proposal from the United States or from mediators. Israel says Hamas remains heavily armed. Israeli Ambassador Danny Danon raised the issue at the Security Council.
Hamas still remains heavily armed. Let me show you the numbers. It still holds thousands of rockets, anti-tank missiles, and tens of thousands of Kalashnikov rifles. In total, Hamas still holds roughly 60,000 assault rifles. These weapons are used not only against us, against Israel, but against Gazans who oppose Hamas rule.
In November, the Security Council approved the Board of Peace through 2027, focused only on Gaza. The board will help manage reconstruction and deploy a temporary international force. US Ambassador Mike Waltz said the force would improve security and allow Israeli troops to withdraw as Gaza is demilitarized under oversight by the United States, Egypt and Qatar.
We'll take a short break now, and when we return, we'll examine how the return of the last hostages remains signals a shift in the Gaza ceasefire and unpack the statements from Israel's leadership about the next phase. Stay with us. Welcome back to A News. The return of the last Israeli hostages remains from Gaza has been announced by Israeli officials as marking the end of the first phase of the ceasefire and a gateway to the next stage of negotiations. However, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has made clear that there will be no reconstruction of Gaza until Hamas is effectively disarmed, and that Israel will continue to assert security control over the territory. To unpack, let's bring in our guest, Ilan Scirlom, a geopolitical analyst from Paris, France. Ilan, thanks for joining us on the program.
Thank you.
Now, the return of the final hostages remains has been framed as closing the first phase of the ceasefire. What does this milestone mean in diplomatic and psychological terms?
Well, thank you for your question. The return of the soldier Aran Gvili is a moment of profound and painful clarity. We already know that his death has already been confirmed by forensic evidence in January 2024. But this wasn't about hope for his survival. It was about the mission to recover his dignity. So psychologically, this closes the limbo of the unlocated. For the Israeli public, moving from an official declaration of death to a physical grave is a fundamental shift. It transforms an abstract loss into a tangible national mourning moment. And Diplomatically, if we take this moment, this milestone marked the end of the humanitarian ambiguity of phase 1 into Gaza, with the final remains of this stage accounted for. The leverage of the missing is gone. We are now stripped of the humanitarian veil and forced into the cold, strategic reality of the day.
Okay. Ilan, we know that with this war, ceasefires have been put in place and then violated time and time again. When leaders frame a phase as complete, is that more about setting expectations or signalling genuine progress?
I would say that calling a phase complete is a strategic choice, not a sign that the crisis is over. While the recovery of Ran Gvili remains bring a tragic closure to one specific chapter, the humanitarian situation in Gaza remains dire. This milestone does not mean the work is finished. It means the nature of the mission is shifting. We are moving now from the immediate urgency of recovery to the structural challenge of the day after. For the leadership, this is a pivot toward the cold reality of governance and long-term security. They are signaling that the international ceasefire framework has reached its limit, and the conversation must now confront the hardest questions. We are moving past the era of crisis management into the era of political resolution. So success is no longer measured only by bringing people home, but by creating a stable reality that prevents future conflict. The first phase has closed, but the most difficult political decisions now are all in just a beginning.
Okay, and Prime Minister Netanyahu says there will be no reconstruction before disarmament of Hamas. Is this a reasonable security position? Or does it risk derailing or delaying humanitarian urgency?
Tough question, I would say. So the demand for disarmament before reconstruction is a position of maximum strategic leverage. But at the same time, it creates a dangerous paradox. From a security standpoint, the logic is very clear. Israel refused to fund or facilitate the rebuilding of a terror fortress. Without total demilitarization, any concrete poured for a hospital or home could technically be diverted back into the tunnel networks that the Israeli army has spent 2 years dismantling. So for the government, reconstruction without disarmament is seen as a sunk cost that simply invite a future conflict. However, this stance risks a massive collision with humanitarian urgency. We are talking about 2 million people living in ruin with no functional infrastructure. So delaying reconstruction until every weapon is surrendered isn't just a security policy. It is a recipe for long-term radicalization. A population with nothing to lose is a perfect breeding ground for Hamas 2.0. So ultimately, the Prime Minister is drawing a hard line to force the international community and the new Board of Peace to take the demilitarization of Gaza seriously. But the reality is that security and reconstruction are two sides of the same coin.
What does it mean, Ilan, in practical terms for Israel to assert security control over Gaza during any reconstruction process?
Well, in practical terms, security control means Israel will maintain an uncompromising perimeter and total oversight over everything that enters or leaves the Gaza Strip. This involves concretely keeping permanent military control over the Philadelphia corridor and enforcing expanded buffer zones to prevent the return of smuggling and cross-border threats. For the construction process, this translates into a strict veto over all materials. Israel intends to monitor every shipment of concrete or steel to ensure that resources meant for civilian homes are not diverted into a new tunnel network. Furthermore, I will say that the government is asserting what it calls operational freedom. This means the Israeli army reserves the right to intervene anywhere in Gaza if the disarmament of Hamas is not fulfilled. By maintaining control over the flow of goods and the Rafah crossing, Israel is using reconstruction as its ultimate strategic lever. The message is clear: no physical rebuilding will occur without a verifiable dismantling of terror capabilities. This is a shift toward a long-term security blockade, where Israel remains the final arbiter of what is allowed to be built and who is allowed to lead.
Is Israel using the ceasefire sequencing to extract political leverage, or is this a genuine red line?
The line between political leverage and a genuine red line is often invisible in a conflict this complex. For the Israeli government, the sequencing of the ceasefire, specifically the transition to phase 2, following the return of Eran Gvili, is both a strategic tool and a fundamental security requirement. It is a genuine red line because the Prime Minister Netanyahu has made it clear there will be no massive reconstruction until there is a verified disarmament of the Hamas. So this isn't just a talking point. It's a policy designed to ensure that Gaza never again becomes a launching pad for October 7th style attacks. By insisting on disarmament before rebuilding, Israel is setting a condition that is viewed as existential for its long-term security. However, it is also clearly being used as a political leverage by framing the current transition as symbolic rather than final. The leadership maintains its freedom of action.
President Donald Trump recently inaugurated a board of peace at Davos aimed partly at Gaza. You mentioned that earlier. How do Netanyahu's public statements square with that broader diplomatic architecture?
Since up to now, Netanyahu's public statements are a calculated attempt to align with President Trump's peace through strength philosophy, while maintaining Israel's specific security red lines. So by closing phase 1 with the return of the last soldier, Netanyahu has technically satisfied a key requirement for Trump's broader diplomatic architecture to move forward. But it's also a significant tension that remains between the two visions, between Netanyahu and President Trump. The Board of Peace that has been inaugurated in Davos is heavily focused on an economic master plan involving massive investment and regional partners like Qatar and Turkey. Netanyahu's position acts as a strategic brake on this process. He's essentially telling the board that Gazan Riviera, this is the Trump expression, cannot be built on top of a terror infrastructure. So for Netanyahu, these red lines aren't just about Gaza. They are about Israel's seat at the table in the new Trump-led order. So he is conditioned to ensure that the international board doesn't just manage the crisis, but permanently eliminates the threat.
Ilan, how is it Trump-led? I mean, I can't not ask the question, what was the point of ratifying this Board of Peace if Israel and Netanyahu still have total oversight over everything in Gaza from now on in?
Well, today, as I said, for Netanyahu, this is not just a question of reconstructing Gaza. We are talking about the security doctrine of Israel. He's using his condition to ensure that the international board is eliminating the threat of the Hamas. So ultimately, Netanyahu is framing his security demands as the only way to Trump plan sustainable. He isn't rejecting the new architecture of the Board of Peace. He's trying to be its ultimate security guarantor.
And what are other key actors, United Nations, EU, US partners, what are they expecting regarding reconstruction and civilian protections?
So there are different key actors I include in the United Nations, the EU, and regional partners. And they are operating with a sense of extreme urgency that often clashes with the current security sequencing. So while they have largely endorsed the Trump-led Board of Peace and the transition to phase 2, their priority now is the immediate stabilization of the civilian population into Gaza. So for the UN and the European Union, reconstruction cannot wait for a perfect security environment. They see the ongoing humanitarian crisis with over 1 million people still lacking adequate shelter as a ticking time bomb that undermines any future peace. So these partners are specifically looking for the full operationalization of what we call the NCAG, the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza. So they expect this technocratic body to move beyond mere planning and begin delivering essential services like healthcare and water under international protection. So ultimately, the international community is pushing for a shift from a blockade mindset to a state-building mindset. They are calling for one authority, one law, one weapon model. But they warn that without a visible improvement in daily life and a clear path toward a reformed Palestinian authority, the reconstruction process will lose its legitimacy before the first brick is even laid into the Gaza Strip.
Ilan, it was a pleasure talking to you today. Thank you very much for your analysis.
Thank you very much.
And now after the break, we'll take a look at the major stories from the region. Stay with us. Welcome back to A News. Now let's take a closer look at the key stories shaping the region. China and Azerbaijan have strengthened their strategic partnership, with both countries pledging closer cooperation across trade, investment and cultural exchanges. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi and Azerbaijani Foreign Minister Ceyhun Bayramov emphasized long-term collaboration and regional stability. Their talks mark a renewed commitment to advancing bilateral and multilateral ties. Our correspondent Mahnur Maktoum has more.
Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi held talks with Azerbaijani Foreign Minister Ceyhun Bayramov in Beijing just recently, as both sides moved to deepen cooperation under their comprehensive strategic partnership. The meeting took place against a backdrop of growing engagement between China and Azerbaijan and ahead of the 35th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations next year. Wang said the elevation of bilateral ties has ushered China-Azerbaijan relations into a new stage of high quality and comprehensive development. He called for sustained exchanges at all levels, deeper sharing of governance experience, expanded people-to-people and cultural exchanges, and stronger alignment of development strategies with high-quality Belt and Road cooperation serving as a key driver for new areas of growth. Noting global turbulence and transformation, Wang said China and Azerbaijan, both Global South countries, should practice true multilateralism, uphold the UN-centered international system, and promote more just and equitable global governance order. He stressed that China views relations with Azerbaijan from a long-term strategic perspective and remains committed to advancing bilateral and multilateral cooperation based on the shared interests of the two peoples. For his part, Bayramov said that the upgrade of bilateral relations last year injected strong momentum into strategic cooperation. He reaffirmed Azerbaijan's adherence to the One China principle and expressed readiness to expand cooperation with China across trade, investment, connectivity, education, tourism, and science and technology, while enhancing coordination within multilateral frameworks to further promote regional peace and prosperity. Mahnur Maktoum, A News, Beijing.
Azerbaijan's Energy Minister Parviz Shahbazov has held talks with European Commission official Gert-Jan Koopman on expanding energy cooperation between Azerbaijan and the EU. The discussions focused on renewable energy, including solar and wind power, as well as gas supplies to Europe, which reached nearly 13 billion cubic metres last year. The sides also reviewed major electricity transmission projects, including routes across the Black Sea and a proposed green energy corridor linking the Caspian region to Europe, aimed at strengthening long-term energy security. Azerbaijan's State Oil Fund has posted a strong performance in 2025 with solid investment returns and significant growth in assets. The fund also made a substantial contribution to the state budget, supporting the country's strategic development.
The State Oil Fund of Azerbaijan says its assets rose sharply in 2025, reaching $73.5 billion by the end of December, a 22.5% increase compared with the start of the year. According to SOFAZ, total revenues for January to December amounted to 37.6 billion manats, about $22.2 billion, while expenditures stood at 14.6 billion manats, around $8.6 billion. Oil and gas sales generated $5.6 billion, with the bulk of revenues coming from the Azeri, Chirag Gunashli and Shah Deniz fields. The fund recorded an investment return of just over 6%, bringing in nearly 6.9 billion manats. A total of 14.5 billion manats, or $8.6 billion, was transferred to the state budget during the year. SOFAZ said favourable global financial market conditions supported asset growth with positive returns from fixed income, equities, real assets and gold investments. Rising gold prices also generated significant extra budgetary income.
Overall, the financial markets was very supportive for the portfolio in 2025, and we have produced positive results across all the asset classes. In terms of the main contributor to the portfolio as a part of the local investment performance was the public equities. And of course, the role of the physical gold, the gold performance was very substantial in terms of the overall asset under management growth.
Beyond the numbers, SOFAZ emphasised that its mandate goes beyond short-term gains, focusing on the long-term strategic development of the country.
SOFAZ supports the national strategic objectives in structural and long-term way. And let me to frame it into three dimensions. First one is the resilience, and second one is the intergenerational value, and the third one is the institutional stewardship. And all of this long-term approach is aligned with our national development priorities, which set in highest level also include the strategic direction articulated by the President Ilham Aliyev.
The fund emphasised it will continue monitoring global markets and risks, maintaining a diversified strategy to safeguard assets and ensure long-term stability.
The Asian Development Bank has approved a regional water management project including Azerbaijan. The project aims to boost cross-border cooperation and ensure climate-resilient water management. Other participants are Georgia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan. It will run under the CAREC program. Technical assistance is valued at $750,000 and funded by the ADB's Special Technical Assistance Fund. The project will improve coordination between countries and strengthen tools and knowledge for sustainable water management. Ambassadors from European Union member states have approved a €20 million military aid package for Armenia. This was reported by Radio Free Europe's Europe Affairs editor Richard Jozwiak, citing diplomatic sources. The assistance provided under the European Peace Facility will consist of non-lethal military equipment. In 2024, the EU also allocated €10 million to Armenia through the European Peace Facility, marking the first military support of this kind in the history of EU-Armenia relations. Kazakhstan says it has lost almost 4 million tons of oil exports following Ukrainian attacks on facilities of the Caspian Pipeline Consortium on Russian territory. The Energy Ministry says the pipeline continues to operate while the situation remains under government control. Our correspondent from Kazakhstan reports.
Kazakhstan lost around 3.8 million tons of oil exports following attacks on facilities of the Caspian Pipeline Consortium. The figure was announced by Energy Minister Erlan Akkenjenov. He stressed that the tankers attacked near CPC facilities were not linked to the so-called shadow fleet. Oil shipments continued despite higher insurance costs. And in annual terms, the country is not expected to lose anything. The Caspian Pipeline Consortium continues to operate at full capacity, loading 2 tankers per day. Offshore loading units number 1 and 3 are functioning normally, but unit number 2, damaged in the attack, remains in a semi-submerged state. So far, weather conditions and strong internal currents have prevented the unit from being refloated and fully inspected. According to the minister, 2 new offshore loading units have been ordered in the United Arab Emirates and are expected to be delivered within 30 days. The situation remains under special government control, as around 80% of Kazakhstan's export oil is transported through the Caspian Pipeline Consortium. The latest attack on the CPC took place on November 29th. Unmanned boats destroyed an offshore loading unit in the waters of the port of Novorossiysk. Following the incident, Kazakhstan's foreign ministry lodged a protest with Ukraine. The energy ministry said that such actions against purely civilian critical infrastructure were unacceptable and noted that alternative oil export routes were being considered. Ukraine mounted repeated attacks on Russia's oil refineries and crude oil terminals in an attempt to undermine one of the most important sources of income for the Russian war economy. Fariza Kalimurzina, Almaty, A News.
Russian President Vladimir Putin met with Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara in Moscow on Wednesday to discuss Syria's stability and Russia's ongoing role in the region. Both leaders highlighted progress in bilateral relations and Syria's efforts to restore territorial unity.
Russian President Vladimir Putin met with Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara at the Kremlin on Wednesday. According to sources, the talks were expected to cover Russia's future military presence in Syria. After al-Shara's coalition overthrew Bashar al-Assad in December 2024, Moscow has been working to strengthen relations with him and maintain its military presence in the country. Russia says it's withdrawing forces from Kamishli airport in northeastern Syria, but is expected to retain its Hmeimim air base and Tartus naval facility.
Much has been done in terms of restoring our bilateral relations. We have also managed to break the deadlock in economic cooperation with growth of over 4%. This may not be as ambitious as we would like, but it is still noticeable progress, and we absolutely must maintain this remarkable trend.
A source at the Syrian Foreign Ministry said the move was seen in Damascus as a gesture of goodwill and a sign that Russia would not get involved in clashes between Syrian government forces and Kurdish-led groups.
Syria has made significant progress and has successfully navigated many obstacles over the past year, the latest of which was the challenge of unifying Syrian land, which Syria's position over the past year has been in support of this unification. Russia certainly plays an important role in stabilizing the situation, not only in Syria, but in the Middle East region as a whole. We hope these efforts continue so that the Middle East can be in the best condition for stability and development, and for it to progress from a condition of destruction to a condition of stability and development.
During the meeting, Putin told al-Shara, "I congratulate you on the accelerated progress in restoring Syria's territorial integrity." Al-Shara, on his second visit to Russia since Assad's ousting, thanked Putin for Russia's support in stabilizing Syria and the wider region.
We'll take a short break now, and when we return, we'll discuss reports that Russian forces are withdrawing from bases in northeastern Syria and what this shift could mean for the region. Stay with us. Welcome back to A News. Russian forces have begun withdrawing from military positions in northeastern Syria, particularly near Kamishli, in an area still controlled by a Kurdish-led coalition after recent clashes and shifts in territorial control. The pullback involving the relocation of troops and equipment comes as the Syrian government seeks to assert authority following gains in territory previously held by Kurdish forces and as ceasefire arrangements remain fragile. To unpack, let's bring in our guest, Dimitri Bridje. He's an expert and political analyst at RIAC. Dimitri, welcome to the program.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Now, Russia's withdrawal from the Kamishla area appears to coincide with the Syrian government's territorial gains. What factors are driving Moscow's decision?
I think that the decision is made that the Kamishli air base is not in need anymore, because the two bases that already Russia have in Syria, in Tartus and Latakia, it's enough for Russian coordination operation with the Syrian government, and it's also strategical changes that happened in the region, because in the past Russia had agreement with the Assad regime to cooperate and fight against terrorism, against ISIS and other groups, but now there is no need for that. So the strategic change, we can say, is related to the political transition that happened in Syria in the end of 2024 and the collapse of Assad regime. Therefore, we can say that Russia is now trying to coordinate with the Syrian new government regarding its bases and regarding the agreements that were signed with the Assad regime, to add new points in the agreements and to, we can say, also rewrite these agreements under the position of the new Syrian government, that the Russian bases should coordinate with the Syrian side, and that there will be more transparency of the Russian, let's say, strategies in Syria.
Okay, so Dimitri, as you say, the Russian forces aren't leaving entirely. It's more of a repositioning, if you like. How might the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces interpret and respond to the reduction of Russian presence in their territory?
I think many things are coordinated with the neighbors of Syria, especially with Turkey, regarding the Russian position in Syria, regarding the strategies that are made inside Syria. And of course, the Syrian Democratic Forces, they cooperated with the Russian side in some points regarding the fighting of terrorism, especially ISIS, and also, as we know, they coordinate their operations with the United States of America. But we saw the position of the President Vladimir Putin, that he was like kind of agree with that the Syrian Arab army, or this new Syrian army, took control of the east part of Syria, where they are, and it was under control of the Syrian Democratic Forces. So we can say that the Russian Federation supporting the new Syrian government regarding the integration of the all the ethnic groups and religious groups in Syria, in order to unite Syria, in order to solve the problems that were in Syria since 14 years.
And Turkey has long opposed Kurdish control near its border. How could this reshuffle of forces affect Turkey's security calculus and regional standing?
I think Turkey also they see as some Kurdish groups as a danger for their national interest. And in some points, there is kind of coordination between the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and the Russian President Vladimir Putin regarding the different issues and different, let's say, problems that facing Syria in economics and also in fighting the terrorism. So I think that Turkish position is with Russia in Syria, and it's coordinating its let's say, changes and the policies with the Russian side.
And the US has historically supported Kurdish forces against ISIS. How does this withdrawal impact US strategy and influence in northeastern Syria?
I think it won't change the U.S. policies in Syria. Of course, we don't see any negative position from the administration of President Trump regarding the relationship between Syria and Arab Republic and Russian Federation and the cooperation that we see right now between two countries. I think, of course, the United States of America is changing its policies right now regarding its support of Syrian Democratic Forces, because as we saw the position of Tom Barak, that the Syrian Democratic Forces, they finished their, let's say, mission in Syria, and that we can say that the United States won't support any more Syrian Democratic Force as it's supported in the past, because the past issue was related to the ISIS case in the region, in Syria and Iraq. Now the ISIS as a project is finished, it doesn't exist anymore. So the US policies are changing in the Middle East, and they want more to to support the Syrian new government and to help the Syrian government to integrate other groups in Syria into the institutions.
So in light of the fragile ceasefire in the region, does Russia's pullback strengthen or weaken the prospects for lasting calm between Syrian factions?
I think Russia now is trying to work on different sides, or on the economical and political and military. Of course, Russia will have a big impact on the new Syrian army, because Russia will will help the new Syrian army into in using the new Russian weapons, and also into training them to use these weapons, and also to help protect Syria from the Israeli side, because as we know, Israeli army attacked many times different positions of this new Syrian army and the groups related to the new Syrian army, and attacked even the capital city of Damascus, the building of the Syrian army. Of course, now Russia is trying to help, first of all, this new Syrian government to integrate all the groups, as I said, and to work that to help Syria to like the position and to work on make the institutions work better regarding all the issues inside the country.
Okay, Dimitri, thank you so much for joining us on the program, and I appreciate your analysis.
Thank you.
You're up to date with world news for the hour. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned to A News.